Obi talked about statistics. You guys saying that statistics will go chop. But you've forgotten that it is not the critic who counts. It is not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. These are the words of Theodore Roosevelt in the Citizens' Republic, or the man in the arena rather. It is not the man who stands there and point and say this and this and this. It's not the man that says, I will do this, I will do that, I will do that. It is the man who actually goes about doing the job. Vice President Kashim Shettima, your state, Bruno, is still not safe at the moment. The state you govern is still under threats here and there. The region you come from, the north, has still not found peace. This is a region whereby people sit with bandits and negotiate and have conversations as if they are brothers and sisters. Anyways, about being brothers and sisters, why not? Vice President Kashim Shettima, supporting the Palestinian people, perfect idea. Fine, I'm in support of the Palestinian people. But the burden of leadership is not on my shoulder about my people, about Nigeria as a country. I am not the president, neither am I the vice. I'm not the Senate president, neither am I a legislator. I am just a writer and a philosopher. That is all there is to my life. That is all there is to what I do and the things I stand for, the things I try to speak out for. People are dying in the north. People are dying in the west. People are dying in the east. People are dying in the south. People are being killed in Cross River. People are being killed in Ogoja. People are being killed in Boki. People are being killed in the east. In Imo State, in Anambra, a Reverend Father just recently got killed. Nobody is saying anything. But Charlie died in America, far away America, which is their right to mourn. But it goes to show where we place our priorities. You know, Charlie died in faraway America. And they are holding services back home in the continent. And people get to be killed in the local region, in the immediate environment, and nobody really cares. Nobody really cares. All they care about is only God knows what. All they care about is what I refuse to understand. Projecting yourself to be what you are not, and projecting yourself to be who you are not. Listening to the speech of the many persons and world leaders at the United Nations, leaves you with so much trepidation. One of such speeches is the speech given by the Nigerian vice president. You see a man whose country has been plunged into a war zone, coming to talk about security and coming to advocate for another nation and advocate for this, and you laugh. You listen to Trump's 1 hour blab, and you want to compare that with Fidel Castro in last century when he held a talk at the United Nations for over 4 hours, 29 minutes, I guess, talking about the situations in Cuba and a couple of other places, and the guerrilla fights he was engaged in, and the situation of his country, and the whole idea of the Cold War, the preparation and the involvement in Yemen, not in Yemen, in Vietnam and a couple of other places, and it leaves you thinking. And I come back to the president of Nigeria. I come back to the vice president of Nigeria rather, because my country has been plunged into a dark web of insecurity, and you see Shetim say these very, very good things, and you see him say in and about this, and somebody really, really captured the heart and breadth of the large chunk of what I ordinarily would want to say. And Progress writes, it is interesting to see the Nigerian government making a case for the state of Palestine and against the continued genocide by Israel at the United Nations Assembly, while it continues to play the ostrich in the massacres and ethnic cleansings of original inhabitants of Christian communities in Benue and Plateau states. It is laughable that a government that has continued to make a case for Fulani aggressors who have dominated ethnic farmlands, displacing thousands, thereby inconspicuously validating the killings of its own citizens. You are going to build your neighbor's house when your roof is leaking. Vice President Shetim, the Nigerian government. Vice President Shetim and the Nigerian government lacks the merit of, maybe that's what was about to be written here. Vice President Shetima, the Nigerian government lacks the merit of speaking on behalf of the oppressed people of Palestine, because they themselves employ and enable oppression of the worst level. They govern a society where press freedom is alien and police will boast brazenly, I will kill you and nothing will happen. By the employment of this government, the rule of law has been relegated and tyranny reigns. Women are sexually harassed and bullied for speaking out. The constitution is suspended at the whims of the president, and political opposition is nearly extinct. How can a Nigerian government speak on justice, a right it does not accord its citizen? Can a man give what he does not have? If any government should speak for the rights of a Palestinian state, it should not be Nigeria. Not when they have the blood of innocent babies torn out of their mothers' bellies, or those who were roasted in their sleep, still crying out for justice. Vice President Kashim Shettima, speaking for peace, justice, and the sanctity of human lives for the state of Palestine, is at best grandstanding. The hypocrisy is astounding. I am curious to see him return to Nigeria to hold the same stance for the many victims of genocidal oppressions in various northern communities, and not just talk, but work to bring them justice and peace. And this is one of those cases where you really ask yourself, what is really at play here? Because you go on the international stage and you play as if what you are doing is the right thing. And Precious is not writing here as somebody who doesn't know Nigeria. This is a person who knows the country in and out, knows the situation and the realities just as me, just as almost anybody. You know how many persons get killed in Nigeria every week? Do you know how many of my friends and my colleagues and associates I have lost in the last period, in the space of 6 months? Last week, last month, a day before yesterday. Do you know how many persons that I know that have died from one form of corrupt practices done in Nigeria or the other? Yeah, we might have arguments as to who wrote the speech. We might call on Gimba Kakanda to come and tell us if he was the one actually that wrote the speech. It's a beautiful speech, well written, well curated, well presented, and the likes of that. But beyond that rhetoric, beyond the fact that this was written and presented, what does he hold for the Nigerian people? What does he hold for the Nigerian? What does that speech hold for the Nigerian man or the Nigerian woman? What should be the outlook for the young Nigerian who wants security, for the young Nigerian who wants progress, for the young Nigerian who wants to see things get to work and get to work well, for the young Nigerian who has lost his life now, or the many whose life have been taken unjustly from them because of crazy policies and stupid inventions done by our government and allowed to happen under Kashim's watch. In his state when he was governor, Nigeria recorded the highest number of casualties born out of terrorism. If my guess doesn't take me too far, it should be the second most terrorized state while he was governor. What did he do? What did he do? A man allegedly, linked to a whole lot of terrorist deals in the country, and you think about it and your guess would be as good as mine. That these people take us for a ride. These people take us for fools, and these people have no regard for life. They have no regards for the Nigerian people. It was the same similar speech that was given last year, and I want to spare you the stress of listening to the speech, but it might be something you want to do.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished delegates. The chaos that shadows our world is a reminder that we cannot afford the luxury of inaction. We will have been consumed by our differences had there been no community such as this to remind us that we are one human family. Even in our darkest hours, we have refused to be broken. This community was born from the ashes of despair, a vehicle for order, and for the shared assurance that we could not afford to falter again. Our belief in this community is not a posture of moral superiority, but an undying faith in the redemption of humanity. It is, therefore, with profound humility that I stand before you today as Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on behalf of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to renew this pledge on behalf of my country. Madam President, Nigeria joins the Committee of Nations in congratulating you on your election as the President of the General Assembly for the 88th session, and assure you of our unalloyed support during your tenure. I commend your predecessor, my brother, His Excellency Philemon Yang, and the Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, for their outstanding stewardship and unifying leadership during these extraordinary times. This anniversary must not be a sentimental retreat into nostalgia. It must be a moment of truth, a pause to measure where we have stumbled and how we might have done better in turning our values into action that meets the demands of today. We are here to deliver a world of peace and development where the respect for human rights is paramount. We must recalibrate the delicate balance between our roles as sovereign governments and our duties as collective partners to renew multilateralism in a world that has evolved far beyond what it was in 1945. The pace of change across borders is a force without pause. It manifests in the tools of technology, in the movements of information and finance, in the corrosive ideologies that preach violence and division, in the gathering storm of the climate emergency, and in the tide of irregular migration. We must own this process of change. When we speak of nuclear disarmament, the proliferation of small weapons, Security Council reform, fair access to trade and finance, and the conflicts and human suffering across the world, we must recognize the truth. These are stains on our collective humanity. For all our careful diplomatic language, the slow pace of progress on these hardy perennials of the UN General Assembly debate has led some to look away from the multilateral model. Some years ago, I noticed a shift at this gathering. Key events were beginning to take place outside this hall, and the most sought-after voices were no longer heads of state. These are indeed troubling times. Nigeria remains firmly convinced of the merits of multilateralism. But to sustain that conviction, we must show that existing structures are not set in stone. We must make real change, change that works, and change that is seen to work. If we fail, the direction of travel is already predictable. We are here to strengthen the prospects for peace, development, and human rights. Madam President, I want to make 4 points today to outline how we can do this. 1, Nigeria must have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. This should take place. This should take place as part of a wider process of institutional reform. 2, we need urgent action to promote sovereign debt relief and access to trade and financing. 3, countries that host minerals must benefit from those minerals. And 4th, the digital divide must close. As our friend, the Secretary General, has said, AI must stand for Africa included. On my first point, the United Nations will recover its relevance only when it reflects the world as it is, not as it was. Nigeria's journey tells this story with clarity. When the UN was founded, we were a colony of 20 million people, absent from the tables where decisions about our fate were taken. Today, we are a sovereign nation of 236 million people, projected to be the third most populous country in the world, with one of the youngest and most dynamic populations on earth, a stabilizing force in regional security, and a consistent partner in global peacemaking. Our case for permanent seat at the Security Council is a demand for fairness, for representation, and for reform that restores credibility to the very institution upon which the hope of multilateralism rests. This is why Nigeria stands firmly behind the UN-80 initiative of the UN Secretary General and the resolution adopted by this Assembly on 18 July 2025, a bold step to reform the wider United Nations system for greater relevance, efficiency, and effectiveness in the face of unprecedented financial strain. We support the drive to rationalize structures and end the duplication of responsibilities and programs so that this institution may speak with one voice and act with greater coherence. Madam President, Africa, none of us in this world can function peacefully in isolation. This is the heavy burden of sovereignty. Sovereignty is a covenant of shared responsibility, a recognition that our survival is bound to the survival of others. To live up to this charge, we must work hand in hand with our neighbors and partners. We must follow the trails of weapons, of money, and of people. For these forces, too often driven by faceless non-state actors, ignite the fires of conflict across our region. Madam President, Nigeria's soldiers and civilians carry a proud legacy. They have participated in 51 out of 60 United Nations peacekeeping operations since our independence in 1960. We have stood with our partners in Africa to resolve conflicts, and we continue that commitment today through the Multinational Joint Task Force. At home, we confront the scourge of insurgency with resolve. From this long and difficult struggle with violent extremism, one truth stands clear. Military tactics may win battles measured in months and years, but in wars that span generations, it is values and ideas that deliver the ultimate victory. We are despised by terrorists because we choose tolerance over tyranny. Their ambition is to divide us and to poison our humanity with a toxic rhetoric of hate. Our difference is the distance between shadow and light, between despair and hope, between the ruin of anarchy and the promise of order. We do not only fight wars, we pit and shelter the innocent victims of war. This is why we are not indifferent to the devastations of our neighbors near and distant. This is why we speak of the violence and aggression visited upon innocent civilians in Gaza, the illegal attack on Qatar, and the tensions that scars the wider region. It is not only because of the culture of impunity that makes such acts intolerable, but because our own bitter experience has taught us that such violence never ends where it begins. We do not believe that the sanctity of human life should be trapped in the corridors of endless debate. That is why we say, without stuttering and without doubt, that a two-state solution remains the most dignified path to lasting peace for the people of Palestine. For too long, this community has borne the weight of moral conflict. For too long, we have been caught in the crossfire of violence that offends the conscience of humanity. We come not as partisans, but as peacemakers. We come as brothers and sisters of a shared wall, a wall that must never reduce the right to live into the currency of devious politics. The people of Palestine are not collateral damage in a civilization searching for order. They are human beings, equal in worth, entitled to the same freedoms and dignities that the rest of us take for granted. We want to make the choice crystal clear. Civilized values over fear. Civilized values over vengeance. Civilized values over bloodshed. We show the opportunities that peace brings, just as the extremists hope to drive apart rival communities and different religions. We work through multilateral platforms within the rule of law to build the consensus and support that makes this immensely difficult and dangerous task that much easier. This is how we deny our enemies the space they crave to fuel tension and despair. It is our experience that this offers the best, perhaps only hope for peace, reconciliation, and victory for the civilized values of a shared humanity. Nigeria is a diverse country, also recognizes the variable geometry of democracy in different forms and speeds. For this reason, we are working with the United Nations to strengthen democratic institutions in our region and beyond through the Regional Partnership for Democracy. Madam President, point 2. The price of peace is eternal vigilance. The increasingly difficult security outlook has prompted many member states to count the cost of the emerging world order. We in Nigeria are already familiar with so difficult choices: infrastructure renewal or defense platforms, schools or tanks. Our view is that the path to sustainable peace lies in growth and prosperity. The government has taken difficult but necessary steps to restructure our economy and remove distortions, including subsidies and currency controls that benefited the few at the expense of the many. I believe in the power of the market to transform. Our task is to enable and facilitate, and to trust in the ingenuity and enterprise of the people. But the process of transition is difficult and brings unavoidable hardship. This year, we held the inaugural West African Economic Summit in Abuja to bring investors and opportunities together. The results far exceeded our expectations and are a clear indication of what innovation can deliver. It is in that same spirit of dynamic review that I invite the United Nations to re-examine the best use of scarce resources. One critical area is climate change. It is not an abstract issue about an indeterminate fate to be settled at some distant point in the future. It is not even solely an environmental issue. It is about national, regional, and international security. It is about irregular migration. Truly, this is an everyone issue. We are all stakeholders, and we are all beneficiaries of the best outcomes. Madam President, this is why relevant ministers have been instructed to work with the UN to make the best use of climate funds. We believe there are huge shared dividends to accrue from increased support for education, for resilient housing, for access to technology and financing to allow vulnerable communities to thrive, to become part of solutions rather than problems. Nigeria and Africa have made significant strides in recent years to put our affairs in order. We can take that progress to the next level, a level that presents new opportunities for trade, investment, and profit, if we can assess reforms to strengthen the international financial architecture. we need urgent action to promote debt relief, not as an act of charity, but as a clear path to the peace and prosperity that benefits us all. I'm calling for new and binding mechanism to manage sovereign debt, a sort of international court of justice for money that will allow emerging economies to escape the economic straitjacket of primary production of unprocessed exports. It has been over 4 decades since the Lagos Plan of Action outlined a route away from debt and dependence that highlighted opportunities that today should still be explored for local added value for processing and manufacturing in everything from agriculture to solid minerals and petrochemicals. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a remarkable achievement of cooperation. We remain fully committed to the achievement of the SDGs and are convinced that this can be best delivered by focusing principally on our primary mission of growth and prosperity. Madam President, on our third point, we welcome steps to move towards peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We agree that international investment and engagement offer a way out of the cycle of decay and violence. Access to strategic minerals from Sierra Leone in the 1990s and Sudan today has for too long been a source of conflict rather than prosperity. Africa, and I must include Nigeria, has in abundance the critical minerals that will derive and drive the technologies of the future. Investments in exploration, development and processing of these minerals in Africa will diversify supply to the international market, reduce tensions between major economies, and help shape the architecture for peace and prosperity on a continent that too often in the past has been left behind by the rivalries and competition between different power blocs. We know in Nigeria that we are more stable when those communities that have access to key resources are able to benefit from these resources. This has been our journey in the oil-producing region of the Niger Delta. I believe that will strengthen the international order when those countries that produce strategic minerals benefit fairly from those minerals in terms of investment, partnership, local processing, and jobs. When we export raw materials, as we have been doing, tension, inequality, and instability pester. Madam President, the fourth pillar for change that I am advocating is a dedicated initiative, bringing together researchers, private sector, government, and communities to close the digital divide. As we stand on the threshold of new and dramatic technological change, we are still absorbing the impact of the revolution on information and communication of the past 20 years. We understand better than we did the opportunities technology offers, as well as the safeguards we need to enable growth and mitigate the potential for corruption. Some worry about fake news. Truly, we have plenty of that, with the potential of devastating real-world consequences in countries rich and poor. I am more worried about an emerging generation that grows ever more cynical because it believes nothing and trusts less. As technology shakes up public administration, law, finance, conflict, and so much of the human condition, I'm calling for a new dialogue to ensure we promote the best of the opportunities that are arising and promote the level of access that allows emerging economies more quickly to close a wealth and knowledge gap that is in no one's interest. I join you today to reassert Nigeria's commitment to peace, to development, to unity, to multilateralism, and to the defense of human rights is beyond compromise. For none of us is safe until all of us are safe. The road ahead will not be easy, and we know there are no quick fixes to the trials that test the human spirit. Yet history reminds us that bold action in pursuit of noble ideals has always defined the story of the United Nations. Time and again, we have found the wisdom to balance sovereign rights with collective responsibility. That balance is once again in question. But I believe, quite passionately, that a renewed commitment to multilateralism, not as a slogan, but as an article of faith, remains our surest path forward. Nigeria dedicates itself fully and without reservation to that noble cause. I thank you all for listening.
You listen to that speech, that of the speech of this year, and you are left asking yourself, what really is this man talking about? To the foreigner, it makes sense. On the global stage, it makes sense. And then you listen to the speech of last year.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, heads of delegation, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, as you assume the leadership of this august assembly, our world is confronted by profound moral questions that will require more than the habitual remarks from this elevated podium to resolve. These are questions about the ultimate purpose of our organization, the United Nations itself, and how it can remain relevant and resilient. It is with this sentiment that I convey to you the warm and fraternal greetings of my countrymen and women, and to congratulate you on your assumption of the presidency of this assembly. Let me assure you of the full cooperation of my delegation in discharging your onerous responsibilities during your tenure. In the same vein, I wish to extend my appreciation to your predecessor, His Excellency Dennis Francis, for the many remarkable achievements recorded during his stewardship. It gives me particular pleasure to commend His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, for his commitment to the cause of peace and development and the democratization of the United Nations to reflect the need to correct the historic injustice that has been done to Africa. I am also delighted to note the steadfast support given to the Secretary General by our own sister and compatriot, Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General, while sharing the burden of leadership and responsibility in leading a complex organization like the United Nations. Mr. President, the theme of this year's General Assembly leaves us in no doubt that there is still work to be done to bridge the gap between the aspirations and the realities confronting our world today. It also underscores the need to remind ourselves that the United Nations stands for inclusiveness, anchored on the tripod of peace, sustainable development, and human rights. Today, these pillars of our organization are threatened. They risk being broken by the relentless pursuit of individual national priorities rather than the collective needs of the nations that are assembled here today. While commitment to multilateralism offers us the surest guarantee of global action to address the existential challenges we face, singularity and nationalism are undermining the aspirations towards a peaceful and collective resolution of such challenges. From last year's summit, and indeed from previous years, we have carried over the numerous challenges of terrorism, armed conflict, inequality, poverty, racial discrimination, human rights abuses, food crisis, hunger, irregular migration, piracy, global pandemics, hyperinflation, nuclear proliferation, grinding debt burden, climate change, and a host of other vexations. The continued manifestations of these challenges testifies to our failings rather than to any lofty achievements on our part. Billions of dollars are being committed to the prosecution of wars and the planning of the embers of conflict. Yet, we always recoil from bringing out the resources we need to build peace and to deliver life's necessities to people. The question of governance is at the heart of our problems and also the solution to them. We recognize this in Nigeria when on 12th June this year, we celebrated a quarter of a century of unbroken democratic rule. We are no less proud of this achievement than the fact that during the last 2 decades, a sustained process of democratization has swept over Africa. However, the return of unconstitutional changes of government and forceful military takeovers in some countries of the Sahel underscore the fragility of democracy when it is not backed by economic development and sustained peace and security. It is this fragility, rather than the milestone that democratic governance has achieved in Africa, that should matter most in our deliberations at this and other high-level segments of the 79th session of the General Assembly. While we are for all possible changes of government, we can also recognize the impatience in cities and villages as a sometimes slow and grinding turn of the wheel of democracy. Our people need employment. They need decent livelihoods. They desire good and affordable education and health care for their children and families. They need to live in healthy, safe, and secure environments. They need hope, and they need opportunity. They desire to live in peace and tranquility, to pursue whatever gives them happiness and contentment. When governments fail to deliver, the people are bound to question the utility of democracy and other ideals like rule of law. The global debt burden undermines the capacity of countries and governments to meet the needs of their citizens. Creeping trade barriers and protectionist policies are destroying the hopes for prosperity of peoples and nations. Unbridled competition, rather than cooperation, is discouraging incentives driving our investments. Above all, insecurity is driving people into unprecedented hardship and misery that in turn affect the people's confidence in democracy. It is the duty of the international community to bring back confidence in democratic rule and constitutional order by paying more attention to the needs and aspirations of the people, rather than paying lip service to human rights, sustainable development, and peace. We need the sustenance of democracy, not just the form. We cannot build durable societies with the threats of terrorism, banditry, and insurgency growing in our countries and regions. Indeed, violent extremism remains an existential threat to both national and international peace, security, and development. We are making concerted efforts to contain and roll back this threat. The high-level African counter-terrorism meeting hosted by Nigeria in April 2024 and its outcome, the Abuja Declaration, promises to provide solutions to the challenges presented by terrorists and insurgents. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, climate change is a driver of insecurity, which also poses a veritable challenge to sustainable development. A few weeks ago, large areas of my country were inundated by seasonal flood waters, including one of our largest cities, Maiduguri, in the northeast. Other parts of Nigeria also experienced similar tragedies, occasioning the loss of lives and property. We need not remind ourselves to remain faithful to the implementation of the commitments that we all gave voluntarily at the various COP meetings. Failure to do so is merely to postpone the inevitable. No country is immune from the effects of climate change. It is better that we cooperate and collaborate to meet this ever-increasing challenge, rather than remaining in our shells, waiting for the inevitable to happen. A common challenge requires a common solution. Nigeria stands ready to meet her obligations in terms of mitigation and adaptation measures nationally and regionally, with the active participation of other countries and international partners. Mr. President, conflict resolution is the main reason why the UN exists, but the task of prevention becomes all the more difficult when conflict becomes normalized, when even the condemnation of violence and civilian casualties and calls for a ceasefire are somehow regarded as controversial. As we emphasize at the Abuja high-level ministerial meeting, we must renew our focus on conflict prevention. Indeed, addressing the root causes of conflict is often the first step towards providing long-term solutions. Clearly, some of the root causes of conflicts are social in nature, including poverty, hunger, ignorance, inequality, and exclusion, as well as other forms of injustice. In the Sudan, other parts of our continent and further afield. Foreign actors are exacerbating these tensions to prolong conflict and deepen the suffering of innocent people. Today, we are all witnesses to the heart-wrenching situation in Gaza and other Palestinian territories. We cannot discuss war and peace, conflicts and resolution, or humanitarian imperatives today without reflecting on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that has been raging since 7th August last year. Of course, the conflict predates this period and has been simmering for a better part of half a century. What it tells us is that the international community has failed to live up to the spirit and aspirations of the United Nations to rid the world of inequality, violence, and domination of one people by another. Justice is antithetical to revenge. Freedom is an inalienable right and a natural entitlement that cannot be denied to any people. The Palestinian people deserve their independence. They deserve to have a home of their own in territories already recognized by this very assembly and by international law, which is being routinely ignored. Nigeria continues to urge efforts to bring back on track the two-state solution that offers the prospect for a new beginning for the region. Nigeria reaffirms to supporting United Nations peacekeeping operations. We recognize the need for Africa to build strong and professional armies to meet the multiple challenges we face. Consequently, we reiterate the call for international support to operationalize the African Standby Force, in addition to the provision of requisite support and resources to ensure the upgrade, take-up, and effectiveness of a center of excellence on issues of counterterrorism in Africa. Mr. President, reform of the Security Council is critical if the UN is to strengthen its relevance and credibility in our rapidly changing world. Some permanent members of the United Nations Security Council have offered encouraging, if tentative, indications of support on the issue of reform of the Council. We welcome the change in tone and urge an acceleration in momentum to the process. The Security Council should be expanded in the permanent and non-permanent member categories to reflect the diversity and plurality of the world. We fully support the efforts of the Secretary General Guterres in this regard. Africa must be accorded the respect that it deserves in the Security Council. Our continent deserves a place in the permanent members category of the Security Council with the same rights and responsibilities as other permanent members. Mr. President, your assumption of the stewardship of the General Assembly presupposes that you will be seized with the progress of the implementation of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. We note that most developing countries are significantly lagging behind in the achievement of these goals, largely due to a lack of resources available to finance their implementation and the burden of unsustainable external debt. It is our expectation that the adoption of the Pact of the Future for the Future will change the narrative, reposition economies, and translate into concrete measures that provide solutions to the challenges faced by developing and least developed countries. This is particularly significant in our region and the Sahel, where human development indices are low and depressing. It is for this reason that we reiterate the call by countries, especially of the Global South, for reform of the international financial architecture and promotion of a rules-based, non-discriminatory, open, fair, inclusive, equitable, and transparent multilateral trading system. We are aware of the debilitating impacts of corruption on global prosperity and national progress. Process of corruption and illicit financial flows constitute a huge chunk of resources needed for sustainable development. The recovery and return of such funds to states of origin is a fundamental principle of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Therefore, the international community must promote practical measures to strengthen international cooperation to recover and return stolen assets and to eradicate safe havens that facilitate illicit flows of funds from developing countries to the developed economies. There is also the urgent need to promote fair and inclusive tax regimes in the world. Nigeria helped introduce the Resolution on Promotion of Inclusive and Effective International Tax Cooperation at the UN. We acknowledge the progress made in the adoption of the terms of reference of the UN Framework Convention on Tax Cooperation. We should deepen this initiative and work towards a UN Framework Convention on Tax Cooperation. Similarly, we must ensure that any reform of the international financial system includes comprehensive debt relief measures to enable sustainable financing for development. Countries of the Global South cannot make meaningful economic progress without special concessions and a review of their current debt burden. The present administration pays due regard to the imperatives of creating a conducive national environment for investment and the ease of doing business. Last year, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signed 4 executive orders to curb double taxation. The government also established the Presidential Task Force on review of fiscal policy and tax reform. These measures are geared towards not only boosting investor confidence in Nigeria, but also to ensure investors make reasonable profit from their investments. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, while the world is transitioning into the 4th industrial revolution, Africa remains energy deficient. The push for the accelerated implementation of SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, therefore, must take into account Africa's precarious situation. Nigeria believes that natural gas remains central to the search for solutions to the energy challenges that Africa and the international community face. Access to affordable, reliable, cleaner sources of energy is more than an environmental or developmental issue. It is a key factor in social peace and international security. Mr. President, Nigeria remains unwavering in its commitment to SDG 13, climate action, including the net zero ambition and transition from fossil fuel energy to clean energy. As a demonstration of this commitment, the government established the Presidential Committee on Climate Action and Green Economy Solutions and appointed a special presidential envoy on climate action. We will redouble our efforts to address the challenges posed by climate change, including the urgent need to transition from fossil fuel energy. Yet, such commitments must be juxtaposed with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and the relevant provisions of the Paris Climate Agreement back in 2015. The Paris Agreement provided for developed countries to take the lead in the quest to achieve net zero and to offer support, including finance, to developing countries for the actualization of the climate change goal. Worthy of note is the loss and damage funding for vulnerable countries secured at COP27 in Egypt and expanded in COP28 in the United Arab Emirates. It is our expectation that this year's 79th session of the UN General Assembly and the upcoming COP29 in Azerbaijan this November will go a step further by providing developing countries, especially African countries, with access to the loss and damage funds, including the $100 billion pledged by developed countries to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change. Mr. President, in this age of digital innovation, we must address the emerging divide between the global South and the global North, which, with the evolution of artificial intelligence, risks becoming wider still. The UN should work towards eliminating barriers to digital economy in Africa, such as high cost of internet services and intellectual property rights. More so, there is a need to work towards common global standards to regulate cryptocurrency trading platforms. This is the most effective way to provide confidence in these markets and limit the potential for instability. Our own experience in Nigeria, as in other countries, shows that new technologies, when not properly regulated, can facilitate organized crime, violent extremism, and human trafficking. In our own case, the trading of cryptocurrency helped fuel speculation and undermine macroeconomic reforms. Separately, we have also witnessed in rich and poor countries alike the corrosive impact of unfiltered hate speech and fake news across social media. There is much more that we could and should do together to strengthen those guardrails that will help release the most progressive elements of the new technologies shaping our world and curb those more destructive tendencies. Mr. President, we are particularly mindful of the imperatives of achieving the advancement of youth and women as a factor in national development, peace, and security. Nigeria has developed its own national action plan on women and security, as well as a national action plan on youth, peace, and security to ensure the participation of both women and youth in the peace and security sector. The summit of the future cannot be deemed successful without setting clear, ambitious, and achievable developmental goals to address the various challenges facing our youth. In line with this aspiration, the Nigerian government will continue to invest in Nigerian youth through initiatives like the revitalization of the National Youth Investment Fund for 2024, focused on youth employment and entrepreneurship. Mr. President, as much as the global family still grapples with the crippling consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, the greatest lesson that we have learned is never again to take any health situation with levity. In line with SDG 3, we must continue to work together to ensure the good health and well-being of all. There is no disease that should be relegated to the background due to some perceived classification of their seriousness or importance. Mr. President, migration is a complex and polarizing issue that impacts on rich and poor countries alike. Nigeria is a country of origin, transit, and destination. We are a major stakeholder in the global migration dynamic and understand the challenges and benefits it brings. Accordingly, I wish to reiterate our support for the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, GCM. The GCM, which all of us should continue to support, represents our collective efforts at providing major safeguards for the treatment of migrants. Mr. President, I will conclude by reaffirming Nigeria's steadfast commitment to the deepening of multilateralism. Just as we did 65 years ago on this podium when we joined the United Nations as the 99th member state, we remain committed to that desire to remain friendly with all nations and participate actively in the works of the United Nations, as expressed by our founding Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. It is my hope that our deliberations this year will result in solutions that will address our collective challenges and accelerate the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the advancement of peace and human dignity for the sake of present and future generations. I thank you all.
And you are taken aback again, and you're like, okay, brilliant speech, great orator, great this, great that. What is oratory without really looking at things that ought to be done and how they ought to be done and how they must not be done? What is going to the international stage to talk about these things where you cannot come back to your own country and actually in real time work out ways to mobilize and bring about security to the people of Nigeria, to the people of Nigeria. Even the Abuja where he is, the Federal Capital Territory where his house is, where they have spent billions of naira renovating a house that never should have been renovated, there's insecurity in Abuja. And I'm not talking about Kubwa. I'm not talking about those out sketches. I'm not talking about Guzape. I'm not talking about Buhari. I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about places like Maitama. I'm talking about places like Zone 3, Zone 4, Zone 1. I'm talking about the main place. I'm talking about Zone 6. I'm talking about the main situation where it is happening. Not them being locked away in Asu Rock. A place so barricaded with so many fences and so many security details. A good thing, for whatever it's worth. But I've walked past Parliament building, I've walked past a president's building, and I know security might be very, very tight in those places too. But you don't see it. It doesn't show itself. It shows itself in the level of sophisticated cameras being installed. It shows itself in the way the citizens are made to look at their leaders, even when they disagree with their leaders. It shows in the different ways in which things play out and how they play out and why they play out the way they play out. In those countries, the so-called developed. In those countries, the so-called up and doing. Those countries are countries where leaders, no matter how bad situations are still in and about, guaranteeing security for their people, so it reduces crime rate. Sarkozy recently has been sentenced to prison for corruption. And you think about Nigeria, and you ask yourself, can this be in Nigeria? Can this be in Nigeria? Can there be a time when we can tell ourselves, the president of our country will be tried, or the ex-presidents of our country will be tried and they will be found guilty, and they will be brought to book, they will be arrested, they will be they will be tried, they will be sent to prison, and in and about those type of stories we like to tell ourselves. I kid you not, it will not happen. I don't see it happening today. I don't see it happening tomorrow. I don't see it happening next week. I don't see it happening next year. I don't see it happening anytime soon. And it doesn't mean I don't have faith. It just means the current crop of corrupt leaders in Nigeria will not let that happen. The current crop of leaders we have in our country will not let this particular situation to be. And this is not Hamlet's, this is not Shakespeare's idea of to be or not to be. This is a situation born out of the desire to keep a people insecure and to keep a business going. If it is not this, it is a business born out of sheer irresponsibility. It is even both. Because if it's a business to keep a people poor and to keep them terrorized so you can stay at the top, it's still irresponsibility, and it's still confusion, and it's still being the most vile kind of person I can think about and I can come to ever imagine. And then on the other case, it's also been the fact that many of our officials are benefiting from these situations. And the sheer sense of irresponsibility is born out of the fact that you take the job slots born out of people who ordinarily want to solve this problem. P2B was clamoring for this particular space and was clamoring to be given a chance to actually salvage the country, a chance to actually make it right for you, for me, for the average Nigerian. What did we tell him? We told him to go fuck himself. We gave him the middle finger, and we told him he doesn't have a structure. As though structure is what brings about governance, as though what it takes to be president is to have a cabal of very, very corrupt people on different fronts. Okay, now, Colette, they have given you the chance. They have given you the opportunity. You've been made president. Oh, I'm going to see the change now. Let us see the change. Let us see what you've done. Let us see what you've put out there. Let us see the things you have done and the things you try to do and the things you want to do and how you want to achieve them. Let us see these things. Nga, there's no way out. There's no way to do it. You don't want to relinquish power. You don't think you shouldn't be in power. You don't think you don't need to be in power. And yet, you still don't want those who can actually do the job to do the job. You and your principal, you campaigned on a lot of things. Did you guys really even campaign? Because we cannot really hold you guys accountable for almost anything. You use spokespersons to finish the Nigerian people, and then you gave us enough skits, and many persons were not really looking at the fact that these skits, these things that these people think about as skits, these things are going to come down to haunt us, Bulaba, this one, that one, the things that were making us happy and making us not happy, making us laugh, were things actually we should be crying about. You guys campaigned for whatever your campaign promises were. You campaigned on a lot of stuff. But what you guys are doing at the moment is something I cannot understand. It's something I cannot see. It's something I cannot know. It is something I would never understand. It is something I can never, ever understand. That you claim to be a master strategist, and you claim to be a lot of things, and you claim to be this guy that knows how to fix the economy. You claim to be an accountant. You and your principal campaigned on a lot of things for the Nigerian people. You campaigned on a lot of things. You campaigned on a lot of things. You promised a lot of things. You said this, you said that. You did this, you did that. You were happy this, you were happy that. You said that one, you said that one, you said this one, you said that one, you said this one. And yet, nothing changed. And yet, nothing happened. And yet, nothing is happening. And yet, we continue like this, and we continue like this, and we continue like this. As though that is all there is to life. As though your Asu Rock and your 2 years left in office, less than even 2 years left in office is the one that want to salvage the country. Kashim, you claim to be a reader. You claim to be a lover of knowledge. And what you and your principal should have done, coming off the back of the unpopular support and the vote you guys didn't get, the unpopular support you needed that you didn't see, it would have been the case that if I were you, I would want to actually, make it work. Make the Nigerian people really come to love me, really come to admire me, really come to be happy with me and be happy with the situations of the reforms I'll be doing, to prove my old pedigree wrong. The pedigree born out of, I'm a bad person, I'm this, I'm that, to prove that pedigree wrong, to prove that particular situation wrong. Because somebody who has lost confidence in people, the only way to get that confidence back is to actually go into the work, to do the work. Obi talked about statistics. You guys say that statistics will chop. But you've forgotten that it is not the critic who counts. It is not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. These are the words of Theodore Roosevelt in the Citizens' Republic, or the man in the arena rather. It is not the man who stands there and point and say this and this and this. It's not the man that says, I will do this, I will do that, I will do that. It is the man who actually goes about doing the job. That is the man. That is the man that people want to see. That is the man that people want to talk to. It is not the critic. The critic is important. The critic is to keep the doer of the deeds up and active, but in the grand scheme of sports, in the grand scheme of things, it is not the critic we want to listen to. We want to listen to you. We want to see what you do. We want you to come to understand that people are dying in Nigeria, that people died in Benue State recently, and you and your principal took it upon yourself to really take a very long time before you want to go down there to go and sympathize with these people. And you got to Benue State and you couldn't even go to the place where this situation happened. You ended halfway. You didn't see the need to find yourself amongst the people that this particular casualty happened to. And it's not once, it's not twice, it's not 3 times, it's not 4 times, it's not 6 times. Vice President Kashim Shettima, your state, Bruno, is still not safe at the moment. The state you govern is still under threats here and there. The region you come from, the north, has still not found peace. This is a region whereby people sit with bandits and negotiate and have conversations as if they are brothers and sisters. Anyways, about being brothers and sisters, why not? Why not? About being brothers and sisters, why not? Why can't we say they are brothers and sisters? They are brothers and sisters. Aren't they all from the north? Aren't they looking at this particular situation born out of a situation where you can tell yourself and tell people that, we are brothers and sisters? Don't persecute our own, and those types of conversations. I don't know what to make of the speech the vice president gave on behalf of the country. The one of last year, the one of this year, and hopefully the one of next year. Supporting the Palestinian people, perfect idea. Fine. I'm in support of the Palestinian people. But the burden of leadership is not on my shoulder about my people, about Nigeria as a country. I am not the president, neither am I the vice. I'm not the Senate president, neither am I a legislator. I am just a writer and a philosopher. That is all there is to my life. That is all there is to what I do and the things I stand for, and the things I try to speak out for. That is all there is to me. That is all there is to my life. That is all there is to the situations and to the things I get to find myself doing and all that. That is all there is to the events of the Nigerian people. People are dying in the north. People are dying in the west. People are dying in the east. People are dying in the south. People are being killed in Cross River. People are being killed in Ogoja. People are being killed in Boki. People are being killed in the east. In Imo State, in Anambra, a Reverend Father just recently got killed. Nobody is saying anything. But Charlie died in America, far away America, which is their right to mourn. But it goes to show where we place our priorities. Charlie died in faraway America. And they are holding services back home in the continent. And people get to be killed in the local region, in the immediate environment. And nobody really cares. Nobody really cares. All they care about is only God knows what. All they care about is what I refuse to understand. Projecting yourself to be what you are not, and projecting yourself to be who you are not before the very people that you shouldn't be doing that to. Well, I hope you come to find the satisfaction in whatsoever you do. But mind you, you are being paid by the Nigerian people, whether borrowed money or not. The drip down there, the people that go there with you, the aids, the logistics, the security details, everything, the ambassador in the United States and all that, they are all there for the Nigerian people. And whatever you guys do, I know you guys don't even believe in, what history will say about me, my legacy and all that. You guys will come to die, and like Buhari, you want us to remember you, and you want us to remember you for the good deeds you think you are doing to the Nigerian people. I kid you not, it's a sad thing on many fronts. It's a sad thing on many fronts. And that is it. That is all there is to this. The Nigerian people are dying. And they don't need a savior in that sense. They need a president who will look them in the eye and say, these are my people. I need to work out a way to salvage their situation. I need to work out a way to really, really think and do things and do them well and do them right and do them in the most right and most just way. Up until now, you and your principal have not done this. Your administration You guys didn't even promise us anything to even start with. But it's a shame that your government is the way your government is, and it's looking at people die, and it's not looking at measures to cut the killings and the level of insecurity and the level of tribal bigotry and the level of ethnic cleansing championed by different Nigerians under your watch. You bear the brunt of the country. You bear the burden of the country. That is why you are the president of Nigeria. That's why you are the vice president of Nigeria. That's why you are the senator. That's why you are a politician. That's why you are a minister. That's why you are whosoever you are holding a public office in Nigeria. The revolution, like DK will say, has no tribe. And it is coming soon. It is coming soon. Here. It will be here with us very soon. Soon, sooner than later, it will be here. I hope you go back to Nigeria and you fix the problem in the country. I hope you call a meeting and you actually look at fixing this particular situation. Else the country will not be better. That is it. I am Biringkpa in Mecca. See you next time.